Judge Marcus Holloway stares down at Officers Brennan and Reynolds from his bench, the same men who had him face down on concrete yesterday. "I recognize you both," he says calmly, removing his glasses. "Perhaps you should have checked my bar card before putting those handcuffs on me." This story, about justice and accountability, begins at the end of a long day. Marcus Holloway, a respected Philadelphia judge, was driving home after visiting his mother, who was recovering from heart surgery. Dressed in a navy blue hoodie, jeans, and sneakers instead of his usual tailored suit, he stopped at a SoCo gas station in a predominantly white suburb. He was just pumping gas, his mind preoccupied with his mother's condition, when he noticed a police cruiser slowly circling the lot. Inside the cruiser were Officers Thomas Brennan and Kyle Reynolds, who had built a reputation for aggressive policing. "Check 'em out," Brennan said, nodding toward Marcus. "Matches the description from the Wawa robbery last week." The vague description, black male, medium build, hood up, could have fit thousands of men, but that didn't matter. They pulled their patrol car directly behind Marcus's BMW, blocking him in. As they approached, their hands were already on their holstered weapons. Marcus, who had seen this scenario play out countless times in his courtroom, took a deep breath and reminded himself to stay calm. "Good evening, officers," Marcus said evenly. "Is there a problem?" Brennan's stance was wide and authoritative. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Marcus explained he was just getting gas, but Brennan ignored him and demanded ID. When Marcus asked why, Brennan hardened his expression. "You match the description of a suspect in a recent robbery. ID now." Marcus, knowing his rights, but also the danger, slowly reached for his wallet. "My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm a judge with the Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas." The officers exchanged glances, and Brennan laughed. "Sure you are, and I'm the police commissioner." Before Marcus could retrieve his wallet, Brennan grabbed his arm and slammed him against the side of his car. "Stop resisting," Brennan shouted, though Marcus wasn't fighting back. Handcuffs bit into his wrists. A young woman at a nearby pump began recording the incident on her phone, and the gas station manager, Mr. Patel, hurried out to intervene, telling the officers he knew Marcus and that he was a judge. The officers dismissed them both. As they pushed the handcuffed Marcus into the back of their patrol car, he caught Mr. Patel's eye. "Please call Diane Chin at the courthouse. Tell her what's happening." The officers pulled away, leaving Marcus feeling as though his dignity and constitutional rights were growing smaller in the distance. The ride to the Abington Township Police Station took less than 10 minutes, but for Marcus, it was an eternity of humiliation. Officers Brennan and Reynolds chatted casually in the front seat, joking about others who had claimed to be important. "They all say that," Reynolds said. At the station, the booking sergeant barely looked up as Brennan announced, "Got a gas station loiter, claims he's a judge." Marcus, refusing to be stripped of his dignity, stated, "I am a judge, and I demand my phone call immediately." They tried to force him to empty his pockets first, but Marcus insisted on his rights. They finally took the handcuffs off of him, and as he placed his belongings on the counter, the sergeant's expression remained unchanged, even when he saw the judicial identification card. Just as Marcus was complying with the order to remove his belt and shoes, a young black officer, Daryl Jackson, approached and did a double take. "Judge Holloway?" he asked. Jackson explained that Marcus had given a lecture at the police academy on constitutional rights during arrests. The irony was not lost on anyone. The sergeant's demeanor shifted, and he immediately called Captain William Preston. Preston arrived and, dripping with artificial warmth, called it a terrible misunderstanding. Marcus, however, was not appeased. "A misunderstanding of constitutional rights, proper police procedure, and basic human dignity," he stated. He declined any special treatment and made his phone call from the regular booking phone, dialing his colleague, Judge Diane Chen, who handled police misconduct cases. By the time he finished his call, his belongings had been returned. Captain Preston again apologized, attributing the incident to Brennan and Reynolds simply being vigilant. Marcus dismissed the excuse, stating that vigilance does not justify constitutional violations. He left the station with his dignity intact, but his faith in the system shaken. The gas station video of his arrest had already gone viral. Back at home, his wife, Vanessa, a lawyer, immediately began planning a civil rights lawsuit. But Marcus had something else in mind. He pulled down several volumes on judicial ethics and precedents. He had discovered that his court's rotation had him next in line to take on a police misconduct hearing, a hearing against the very same officers in precinct that had just profiled him. While Vanessa and his colleague Diane Chen warned him of the potential conflict of interest, Marcus was determined. He said, "Let them. For once, let the system work the way it's supposed to." The morning of the hearing, Officers Brennan and Reynolds arrived at the courthouse with a sense of routine confidence. Their captain, William Preston, had assured them that the police department would handle the Judge incident and that the case they were there for, a police misconduct complaint from a man named Antoine Johnson, was baseless. "Just answer questions directly, stick to the report language," Preston advised. They chuckled to themselves about the possibility of seeing the judge wannabe filing his complaint while they were there. Meanwhile, Marcus entered the courthouse through the judge's private entrance, aware of the whispers and side glances. In his chambers, his colleague Judge Diane Chen, while concerned, gave him her support. "For what it's worth, I think you're right. Just be careful." His clerk informed him that the case had some last-minute filings and unusual media interest. He opened the file and saw the name of the complainant, Antoine Johnson. He then saw the names of the officers involved, Thomas Brennan and Kyle Reynolds, the very same officers who had arrested him. He also saw that the internal investigation had predictably cleared the officers of wrongdoing, despite witness statements that supported Johnson's account. The district attorney, Sandra Whiteman, approached Marcus, clearly uncomfortable, to express the department's concern about his impartiality. Marcus countered that his experience gave him relevant insight into departmental practices. He put on his judicial robe, feeling its weight differently today. Outside the courtroom, a crowd had gathered, including reporters and community activists. As the bailiff announced his entrance, Marcus ascended to the bench and watched the recognition dawn on the officers' faces. Brennan froze in mid-sentence, and Reynolds paled. "Be seated," Marcus instructed the courtroom. He then addressed the extraordinary circumstance directly, acknowledging his personal encounter with the officers the night before. The union attorney immediately rose and requested his recusal. Marcus had anticipated this. He listened to the arguments from both sides before denying the motion. He stated that his experience did not disqualify him, but instead provided relevant insight into departmental practices that may bear directly on this case. He then turned to the public defender, Ms. Rivera, and told her, "You may call your first witness." The hearing began with the testimony of Antoine Johnson, a 24-year-old nursing assistant. He nervously described being pulled over by Brennan and Reynolds for a supposed broken taillight. He said they became aggressive when he asked why he was being stopped, claiming they smelled marijuana. Despite his compliance, they pushed him against his car, handcuffed him, and charged him with resisting arrest and obstruction, even though they found nothing in his car. The public defender, Ms. Rivera, then introduced a series of powerful evidence. First, a cell phone video from a bystander that showed Johnson remaining calm and compliant, which directly contradicted the officer's report. Then she called two other men who had similar experiences with the same officers. The courtroom grew quiet as Rivera played the officer's body camera footage. It showed Johnson being calm, but conveniently the footage ended abruptly just as he was being handcuffed. The case took a dramatic turn when Mr. Patel appeared. he told the court that he had checked his security footage from the night of Johnson's arrest. The video he revealed showed Brennan and Reynolds at the gas station an hour before the stop, discussing their plan to meet their monthly quota of stops. Reynolds was clearly heard saying, "Let's check the south side of town. Always good for a few stops there." The south side was predominantly Black and Latino. The union attorney, Gordon, seeing his defense crumble, requested a recess. When court resumed, he called Captain William Preston to the stand. Under Rivera's cross-examination, Preston was forced to admit that the department had performance metrics that encouraged officers to be proactive, which essentially amounted to a quota system. The officers' own testimonies contradicted each other and the video evidence. Under pressure from Rivera, Reynolds admitted that the pressure to show results. The remainder of the afternoon saw the hearing transform from a case about individual misconduct into an indictment of an entire system. Marcus allowed this, stating that when evidence suggests individual actions reflect institutional patterns, the court has an obligation to examine those patterns. He effectively put the entire system on trial. Rivera seized the opportunity, calling more witnesses who had filed complaints against the department. Their testimonies formed a damning pattern. Black and Latino residents were stopped at rates 5 times higher than white residents. Community activists presented statistical analyses of department data, painting a clear picture of discriminatory enforcement. As the evidence mounted, Police Commissioner Frank Hargrove was forced to take the stand, an unprecedented step. He insisted the department categorically rejects racial profiling, but he had no satisfactory explanation for the statistical disparities. The district attorney, Sandra Whitman, looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence mounted against her own office's reliance on questionable police stops. She requested time to review her office's procedures for handling officer testimony and evidence, a significant concession that could affect hundreds of pending cases. As the court day neared its end, Gordon made a desperate attempt to limit the damage, but it was too late. Marcus addressed the courtroom, stating that the evidence showed not isolated mistakes, but systemic issues requiring systemic solutions. He announced that the next day he would not only rule on Johnson's case, but also on the broader concerns raised in the proceedings. He remained on the bench after the courtroom emptied, contemplating how a personal experience of injustice could transform into an opportunity for meaningful change. The next morning, the courthouse was crowded with protesters, supporters, and media. To ensure a fair and transparent process, Marcus's colleague, Judge Diane Chen, temporarily presided while Marcus was sworn in as a witness. Taking the stand and removing his robes, he recounted the events at the gas station with precision, stating that he felt 200 years of American history pressing against his cheek. When he was finished, he returned to his chambers to prepare his ruling. After hearing the closing arguments, Marcus returned to the bench to deliver his ruling. He addressed the unusual nature of the proceedings, but maintained that it would be improper to recuse himself and effectively prevent the systemic issues from being addressed. Before he could proceed, Officer Brennan unexpectedly rose. His demeanor was a stark contrast to his previous defiance. He confessed that he had been trained to see a man like Marcus as a threat, and that the problem was bigger than me or Reynolds. It's how we're taught to see the world. This was a significant admission, marking the first crack in the wall of denial. With this new insight, Marcus delivered his ruling. He found that Officers Brennan and Reynolds had violated Antoine Johnson's constitutional rights through racial profiling and excessive force. He ruled that their actions reflected departmental patterns rather than isolated incidents. As a remedy, he ordered a list of comprehensive reforms for the Abington Township Police Department. First, Brennan and Reynolds were suspended without pay for 6 months and required to undergo extensive retraining. Second, the department had to implement mandatory body cameras with footage subject to civilian review and revise its performance metrics to prioritize constitutional compliance over stop and arrest numbers. Third, he established a civilian oversight committee with genuine authority to review complaints. He also ordered compensation for Johnson and a review of all arrests made by the department in the past 3 years based on vague criteria. With the final strike of his gavel, Marcus adjourned the court. The hearing was over, but its impact was just beginning. Brennan and Reynolds left separately, no longer a united front. Reynolds looked contemplative, while Brennan, now overwhelmed, simply looked defeated. Marcus reflected on how a single moment of injustice had transformed into a potential reimagining of policing in their community. 6 months later, Marcus Holloway was at the Abington Township Community Center addressing the inaugural meeting of the new Police Accountability Commission that he now chaired. The room was packed with a diverse crowd of officers, community members, and local officials, a symbol of the unprecedented collaboration that had begun. The changes implemented since the ruling had exceeded his expectations. Every officer now wore body cameras that could not be manually deactivated, and their footage was subject to civilian review. Stop data was tracked and publicly posted to reveal racial disparities, and most significantly, the department's evaluation system had been completely overhauled. Officers were no longer rewarded for high numbers of stops and arrests, but for positive community engagement and constitutional compliance. Marcus reported that preliminary data showed a 40% reduction in discretionary stops, while crime rates remained stable. In the front row, Officer Daryl Jackson had been promoted to lead the department's new Community Relations Division, his courage rewarded. Behind him sat Officer Kyle Reynolds, back on duty after his suspension and training. Reynolds had become an advocate for reform, mentoring younger officers and earning growing respect for his willingness to acknowledge past wrongs. Officer Thomas Brennan's journey had been more difficult. He had resisted the retraining, but gradually began to confront his biases with the support of unexpected allies, including Antoine Johnson himself. Brennan was a symbol of the challenging personal transformation required for true change. Marcus introduced a panel of speakers, including Antoine Johnson, whose case had catalyzed these reforms. Johnson, now a criminal justice student, told the audience that Marcus had shown them that justice requires action, not just acknowledgement. The gas station where Marcus had been arrested had even become an unexpected community hub, with Mr. Patel offering free coffee to participants in the monthly police dialogue sessions. Marcus's son Jamal, initially angry and disillusioned, was now considering a career in law or law enforcement, seeing both as paths to continue the work of reform. Marcus acknowledged that the work remained unfinished. There was still resistance from officers who preferred the old ways, and some community members remained skeptical. But the reforms in Abington Township were just beginning to spread to neighboring jurisdictions. Transformation isn't an event, it's a process, Marcus concluded. What happened at that gas station 6 months ago revealed deep problems in our system, but it also revealed our capacity to confront uncomfortable truths and commit to building something better. Later that evening, Marcus pulled into the same gas station to fill his tank. He noticed a young black man at the next pump, watching a police officer inside the convenience store. There was still a learned vigilance in the young man's posture, but when the officer emerged and nodded respectfully in their direction, something subtle shifted in his expression. Marcus caught his eye, and they exchanged a silent acknowledgement, not of a problem solved, but of progress made. As he drove home, Marcus reflected on how a single moment of injustice had become a catalyst for change. The system wasn't perfect before his arrest, and it wasn't perfect now, but it was better. And in the difficult work of justice, better was worth fighting for. The story illuminates profound truths about justice, accountability, and systemic change. When Judge Holloway experienced firsthand the racial profiling he'd heard about in his courtroom for years, it bridged the gap between abstract legal principles and lived reality. The narrative reveals how racial bias operates not just through individual prejudice, but through institutional practices, policies, and incentives that shape behavior. Meaningful reform requires both accountability for past wrongs and pathways to redemption. The story shows that justice isn't a destination, but an ongoing process requiring vigilance, commitment, and community engagement. Real transformation demands fundamental shifts in how we see each other and ourselves.